teams. And the two teams that I'm locking in on this year. I'm a Chicago Bulls fan, by the way, just to throw that out for anybody who does not know me personally. Big fan of Chicago Bulls. Not necessarily from the Jordan era. I am 27 or about to be 27 years old. It's not necessarily from the Jordan era. He won his last championships around the time I was born. I am more built out of the Derrick Rose era. Derrick Rose is easily my favorite player in basketball history. That's a story for a different day, maybe an off-season story time. Nonetheless, if I am not watching Chicago Bulls basketball, I will be watching the Orlando Magic. If I am not watching Chicago Bulls basketball, I will be watching the New Orleans Pelicans. Now, obviously, with this being my job and with this being something that I want to do as a long-term career, every game shall be watched. But if there are two teams that I will be locking in on this year, it's the Magic and the Pelicans. Let me explain. I'm going to start with the Pelicans because they're the easier sell. Skinny Zion is just a marvelous storyline to keep tabs on. Like, duh. Same way everybody was infatuated with the Skinny Luca stuff, where he comes on the cover of a sports magazine looking completely cut up, very different. It felt like a direct response to some of the things that were said negatively about him from the people like Nico Harrison in the Mavericks front office. The same thing could be said for Zion Williamson. Like, Zion Williamson making this transformation, we've seen him do physical transformations in lesser degrees before. This is probably the most drastic version of it. Zion, watching Zion in the open floor in a more healthy manner, I think is going to be both interesting to see how he is as a play finisher, because his burly size and physicality was one of the biggest things that made him such a draw coming out of high school and especially coming out of Duke. Now that he's a lot slimmer, maybe he's not as physically dominating, but his first step was already one of the better ones at the power forward position to begin with. Now, at a reduced size, that first step looks even more dangerous. His ability to finish around the rim, if he's able to be more effective as a rim finisher now, because the size doesn't hold him back as much and the impact hitting the ground doesn't hold him back as much, he should be able to have a healthier season. I believe he played 71 games last year. If he's able to do that again this season, that could be big for the New Orleans Pelicans. I think that Trey Murphy III back healthy, I think that's a dude that should be on everybody's breakout candidate list, because I feel like now with Brandon Ingram gone, they are going to give the keys to Trey Murphy III to really unlock himself as an on-ball shot creator at the three. This New Orleans Pelicans team, there's some questions, right? Jeremiah Fears as the point guard for them. What does that look like? Obviously, Kevon Looney is starting the season injured. Yves Messi is going to be somebody that gets a lot of burn in the beginning. But what does it look like when you have Yves Messi and then you have a veteran like Kevon Looney in the lineup as well? Obviously, you still have Jose Alvarado. You still have Herb Jones. Like, this team is very similar to the New Orleans Pelicans of 2025 is very similar to those Indiana Pacers teams with Victor Oladipo. They feel like a team where they have a guy who feels like a fringe all-star, could be a top 10 player in the NBA. That's what Victor Oladipo was at one point for the Indiana Pacers. Regardless of whatever you say, that man helped push the Miami Heat to a 7-game series in a day and age where the Miami Heat looked absolutely unstoppable with the big three, right? And the Indiana Pacers were able to do that with Victor Oladipo as their best player. So, yes, he was a fringe top 10, top 15 player in the NBA at the time. And I think that the when healthy caveat for Zion Williamson is very similar to that. And then you have a lot of very effective starters who are good within their role with upside to maybe present a bigger issue to certain teams. I think Trey Murphy as a floor spacer, very dangerous. I think his ability to shoot the three at a high clip is going to make him one of the best knockdown three-point shooters this upcoming season, and I think they're going to give him the ball a lot more this year to do more as an on-ball initiator. Herb Jones, all-NBA caliber defender on a night-to-night basis. Jose Alvarado, scrappy defender, effective defender on a night-to-night basis. This team, I think, is going to be really interesting, and the biggest question is going to be around Zion's health And what does he look like now with this complete physique change in terms of what type of skill set he used to rely on versus the things that he is going to be able to do now? Let's move on to the Orlando Magic. The Orlando Magic are an interesting team for me, not only because in my personal work slash what my actual occupation is, one of the teams that I cover very closely is the Orlando Magic. So I familiarized myself with them a lot this summer. But the storyline around the Orlando Magic is as follows: the Orlando Magic are projected to be the third best team in the Eastern Conference behind the Cleveland Cavaliers and the New York Knicks. Paulo Banchero is seen to be a player that has the chance to take a leap into the MVP conversation. ESPN ranked him as a top 20 player coming into the season. Other player rankings have had him as a fringe top 25 to top 20 player in the NBA with a chance to take a leap this season. Franz Wagner, very similarly, has been mocked anywhere between 35 and 45 in terms of top 100 rankings over this past summer. And he's a guy that has a chance to take an all-star leap as well. Desmond Bane in the Eastern Conference is much more likely to be in all-star consideration, and is a guy that already has shown he can be a 20-point per game scorer that can knock down threes at a 40% clip. And that's one of the biggest issues that the Orlando Magic dealt with last season. They were the worst three-point shooting team by a country mile last year. And it was one of the biggest things that held them back. That and the fact that they were so significantly injured last year. There's a stat that came out that said that the trifecta of Paulo Banchero, Jalen Suggs, and Franz Wagner only played a combined 7 games together on the floor last season when they went 41 and 41. That goes to show you how injured they were, that their three best players last season were practically staggered in terms of their injury situations. And so we didn't get to see what they really were as a basketball team, taking that step forward after pushing the Cleveland Cavaliers to 7 games the season prior. To go a step further than that, this is an Orlando Magic team that upgraded across the board, I felt like, in a real way, not just with Desmond Bane, but with getting Tyus Jones as the backup point guard. Now, again, another thing that if people don't know me, Tyus Jones is my favorite backup point guard in the league. He's easily my most intriguing six man in the NBA. I know, weird infatuation, but he fits the archetype of your traditional point guard in the modern NBA, where he can shoot the three ball at a high clip. He's a good decision maker. He doesn't turn the ball over. Has had one of the best assist to turnover ratios in the NBA practically his entire career. Was the most effective with the Memphis Grizzlies. Some of these other stops like Washington and Phoenix, they were all tricky fits. But when he was the backup point guard for the Memphis Grizzlies, he had one of the best assist to turnover ratios in the NBA. John Morant would miss time, and that Memphis Grizzlies team would still go like 8-2 while John Morant was on the bench trying to get back healthy, right? He's just a steady basketball player. And for the Orlando Magic, one of the biggest things that hurt them last season and really hurt them in that postseason against the Cleveland Cavaliers was just that they didn't have anybody who could help settle them down. Yes, there was a lack of shot creation from Franz Wagner. Yes, it felt like Paulo Banchero practically was backpacking that offense. But a lot of that had to do with the fact that they just could not get themselves into easy half-court offense. It kind of alludes very similarly to what I was saying about the Houston Rockets earlier in the podcast with Ahmed Thompson. Now, Jalen Suggs is an efficient player. Last year, he had a breakout year as a three-point shooter. Last year he continued what was a breakout shooting year the year prior as a three-point shooter. He's not a high-level passer, though. He's a good decision maker with the basketball, but he's not a high-level passer. He's not somebody that you necessarily are, going into the half court and we're going to run 7 straight floppy action plays where I need you to be able to hit the screen. I need you to be able to hit the roll man off the screen with an efficient pocket pass to create an easy mid-range floater slash jump shot opportunity. Like, No offense to Jalen Suggs, but he's just not that guy that you can continuously run efficient half court offense through at the point guard position. Tyus Jones gives you a different flow. I think that Anthony Black is going to be really effective off the bench for this team. He's going to be more aggressive. I think he understands that he already has the defensive chops at 6'9" to guard in space. I think he can guard ones through threes. I think he can guard small ball fours because he has the physical gifts as an athlete to maybe guard in space against the fours. You have Tristan da Silva, who had a really strong Eurobasket. Team Germany with him and Franz Wagner won the whole dang thing. And Tristan was a knockdown three-point shooter throughout all of Eurobasket. If that translates during the regular season for the Orlando Magic, you now have Tristan da Silva, Desmond Bane, Tyus Jones. You draft Jace Richardson, who had a really strong summer league and preseason, was one of the top 5 rookies in preseason, and was one. I think he was the best 3-point shooter in preseason. Shot 70% from beyond the arc, in those 4 games. And you look at the makeup of that team now, and you're like, wait a minute, they have real floor spacing. Paulo Banchero is already one of the best players in the NBA at drawing foul contact. He's been averaging at least 8 free throw attempts per game since his rookie year. Franz Wagner averages about 5 to 6 free throw attempts per game. He had a game in the preseason where he got to the line 10 times. If Paulo Banchero and Franz Wagner can get to the line and combine 17 to 20, 21 times a night, pair that with the fact that they now have efficient three-point shooting around them, this is a team that has real offensive upside. Mind you, this team last season, even without Jalen Suggs, who was the linchpin of their defense on the perimeter, they were the second best defense in the NBA last year. The biggest foible for the Orlando Magic has been offensively. They've been a bottom 5 offense every year in the Paulo Banchero era. And more particularly, the Orlando Magic have been a bottom 10 offense since the Dwight Howard era. A bottom 10 offense since the Dwight Howard era. So, real floor spacing, efficiency from the bench with guys like Tristan da Silva, Anthony Black, and Tyus Jones coming off the bench, and a team that just has more to fight for this year. Last year, they were so injury riddled that just making the playoffs and getting into that series against the Boston Celtics was just good experience for them. But this year, I don't necessarily think there's quote unquote championship aspirations, but I think that this is a good litmus test for them, right? The Orlando Magic have to get out of the first round this year. They have to. Otherwise, there's going to be some real wholesale changes, and it's going to start with questioning the duo of Franz Wagner and Paulo Banchero. Why? Because people are already doing it. People are doing the same thing with Paulo Banchero and Franz Wagner that they were doing with Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, where it's like, they're a little redundant. They both kind of need the ball in their hands a certain amount to be the most effective. They both play repetitive position. Are they actually just stunting each other's growth by getting in each other's way? Now, we saw how that worked out. Once you got competent ball play at the point guard position, and you got consistent three-point spacing across the board, both on the perimeter and from players like Al Horford, and winning a championship. I think the Orlando Magic are in a similar conversation for that. I think the Orlando Magic, with this move of Desmond Bane, with this move of Tyus Jones, if they can get more consistent play from Wendell Carter Jr., who's been kind of in and out when it comes to the Orlando Magic, given the fact that he has a real, injury history of his own. The Orlando Magic can be the Boston Celtics. I know that sounds kind of nuts, but they can. They have a very similar infrastructure to the Boston Celtics if you look at it. Star forward that can be an MVP caliber player. That was Jason Tatum for the Celtics. For the Orlando Magic, Paulo Banchero. Check. Solid secondary ball creator, positional size, able to get his shot, can be effective in the half court, also very dangerous in the open floor. That was Jaylen Brown for the Boston Celtics. Franz Wagner. Defensive-oriented point guard with the ability to knock down threes at a high enough clip. In their championship year, that was Drew Holiday. knockdown 3-point shooter and secondary ball handler, tertiary ball handler, good decision maker, and somebody who can also hit the three ball at a high enough clip. That was that's Derek White. That for the Orlando Magic now is Desmond Bane. Now I think Derek White is a much better defender than Desmond Bane, but nonetheless, similar archetype for what the Orlando Magic are asking of him in comparison to someone like Derek White and what he's asked to do and what he was asked to do in that championship run for the Boston Celtics. And then at center, a floor spacing big that can be an effective rim protector against some of the better teams in the Eastern Conference, more particularly guys like Giannis Antetokounmpo, guys like Joel Embiid, and that's what Al Horford was for them in that championship run, and that's what Wendell Carter Jr. has to be for the Orlando Magic. And unironically, Wendell Carter Jr. was compared to Al Horford coming out of that draft class when he was picked up by the Chicago Bulls. The Orlando Magic can be the Boston Celtics. They legitimately can. They have the infrastructure built for them to be that kind of team. The question is just whether or not certain guys can take the strides to reach that level of being that good. Because the biggest separator for the Boston Celtics, besides personnel, is that they were the best 3-point shooting team in the league, if not a top 5 3-point shooting team in the league the last 2 seasons. Orlando's not that. So they have to be a facsimile of that in a different way. Does that mean dominating the offensive and defensive glass? Does that mean that they are one of the best teams in terms of getting to the free throw line at a high clip? Those are the questions, because they're not going to be a good enough 3-point shooting team to match what the Boston Celtics have been over the last 2 years. They're just not, even with the personnel changes they've made. But can they be Boston Celtics dominant in a different way? That's going to be one of the biggest question marks for me for them this upcoming season. Is they have the roster built. They're deep at point guard and shooting guard, or at least they're deep as far as the backcourt's considered in terms of what kind of flexibility they have within the lineup within their backcourt. They had 2 studs at the power forward and small forward position. The question is just like, what are you going to do with it? And what does it look like in year 1 with Desmond Bane as the third option for this team? So as a recap, New Orleans Pelicans, I just want to see what Zion Williamson does. This might be the last time I get on the Zion Williamson bandwagon, and that's going to have a lot to do with how this New Orleans Pelicans team plays this season, and more particularly, how is Zion Williamson this upcoming year. And then for the Orlando Magic, they're a team that I obviously cover in my spare time as part of, or they're a team that I cover as part of my work, but also they are an intriguing basketball team because they have really high expectations as a young squad. The Oklahoma City Thunder had very high expectations last season as a young basketball team, and they went on to be the second youngest team to win a championship in NBA history. I don't know if the Orlando Magic are that, but I think they have the build roster-wise to really be dangerous in this version of the East, especially with teams like Boston and Indiana having real question marks in terms of who their lead guy is going to be this upcoming season and what that means for their team, for the course of 82 games. So with that being said, those are my 3 main topics for today's episode. I'm going to be ending today's episode the same way I ended last episode, which is just going to be